The pain started as a dull ache, deep in my lower abdomen, but within minutes it became unbearable. My vision blurred, and my legs trembled beneath me. I stumbled forward, pressing my hand against the cold, metallic wall of the human medicals facility, trying to catch my breath. The air felt thick, too heavy to inhale properly. My skin flickered, the bioluminescent glow dimming as my body weakened. I wasn't supposed to be here. My mission on Earth had nothing to do with this. I was sent as an emissary, a representative of the Arvon, to establish peaceful relations. I had studied humans, learned their languages, and adapted to their customs as much as my biology allowed. But there was one thing I had never prepared: for breeding. It was supposed to be instinctual, a sacred bond that tied two beings together, one of the few moments in our existence where logic gave way to something deeper. But something had gone wrong. Something inside me was tearing apart, rejecting the process. I had tried to endure it alone, but now, standing in this sterile, white-walled room, I knew I couldn't. A sharp wave of pain shot through me, and my knees buckled. I barely registered the sound of rapid footsteps before strong hands caught me, steadying me before I could collapse. A voice, firm yet gentle, filled the space around me. "Hey, stay with me. What's happening to you?" I forced my eyes open and met the gaze of the human medic. Ren. His dark eyes were focused, scanning me with concern as he supported my weight. He was taller than me, his body lean but strong, his grip steady as he eased me onto the medical bed. His warmth seeped through my skin, grounding me despite the agony tearing through my body. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. I had never felt this weak before. My species was built to endure, to withstand pain and hardship, yet here I was, shaking in the arms of a human. Ren moved quickly, his hands already working to assess my condition. He pressed his fingers against my wrist, likely searching for a pulse, but my physiology was different from his. He frowned, eyes narrowing as he studied me. "You're in distress," he said. "But I don't know enough about your anatomy to help properly. You need to tell me what's happening." I swallowed hard, forcing my voice past the burning in my throat. "My organ, it is failing." His expression darkened. "What organ? Your heart? Your lungs?" I shook my head weakly. "No. The reproductive organ. During bonding, something went wrong." Understanding flickered in his gaze, but he didn't recoil. He didn't look at me with disgust or confusion, only with determination. He pressed his hand against my abdomen, feeling the tense muscles beneath my skin. "Your body is rejecting something," he murmured. "I need to scan you. We don't have time to waste." I barely nodded before another wave of pain hit me, my back arching off the bed, my hands clenched into fists, my bioluminescence flaring in response to the agony. I felt Ren move, grabbing a small device from the nearby tray and pressing it against my skin. The hum of human technology filled the air, and I tried to focus on the sound instead of the pain. His jaw tightened as he read the results. "There's severe internal damage," he muttered. "Your system is overloading. If we don't stop this, it's going to shut down completely." I gasped, my breathing shallow. I knew what that meant. Without intervention, my body would break beyond. "Repair." Ren didn't hesitate. He moved with precision, his hand steady as he adjusted the device, scanning deeper. "I need to relieve the pressure and repair the tissue, but I don't know if human medicine is compatible with your physiology." "Try," I whispered. "Do something." He nodded, reaching for a syringe filled with a clear fluid. "This is a stabilizer. It might help regulate your system while I work." I didn't question him. I had no choice but to trust him. I felt the sharp sting of the needle as he injected the solution into my skin, and almost instantly, a cool sensation spread through my body. The pain didn't vanish, but it dulled, just enough for me to breathe again. Ren exhaled sharply, his hands moving with careful efficiency as he worked to repair the damage. I focused on his face, on the way his brow furrowed in concentration, on the tension in his jaw. He was entirely focused on saving me. I had always thought of humans as unpredictable, reckless. My people spoke of them with caution, warning that their emotions made them dangerous. But in this moment, I saw something else. I saw a being who refused to give up, who was willing to fight for a life that wasn't even his own. Minutes stretched into eternity as he worked. My body trembled, exhaustion threatening to drag me into unconsciousness, but I forced myself to stay awake. Ren kept talking to me, his voice steady, grounding me. "You're strong," he said softly, "but even the strongest need help sometimes." His words stirred something deep inside me. My species never spoke of weakness, never admitted when we needed help. And yet here I was, clinging to the life this human was trying so desperately to save. Finally, after what felt like hours, Ren stepped back, exhaling in relief. "It's done," he murmured. "Your body should stabilize now, but you need to rest." I stared up at him, my chest rising and falling with deep, slow breaths. The pain was still there, but it was different now, manageable. My limbs felt heavy, my mind clouded with exhaustion, but I was alive. Ren sat beside me, his hands stained with remnants of my glowing blood. His shoulders were tense, his body still coiled with the effort of what he had just done. "You saved me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He gave me a small, tired smile. "Of course I did." A strange warmth spread through my chest, something unfamiliar, yet not unwelcome. I had come to this world expecting nothing but duty and obligation. Yet, as I lay there, feeling the lingering touch of his hands, the steady presence of his gaze, I realized something else entirely. Perhaps I had been meant to come to Earth for this. I tried to move, but my limbs refused to obey. The exhaustion weighed down on me like a heavy force pressing me into the medical bed. My breathing had slowed, no longer ragged with pain, but each inhale still felt like a battle. My body was still weak, still recovering from whatever had gone. Wrong inside me. Ren remained beside me, watching me carefully, his dark eyes filled with something I couldn't name. Concern? Curiosity? I swallowed, my throat dry. "What did you do?" "I sealed the internal damage," he said, his voice steady, professional. "Your system was in shock, whatever process your body was going through. It wasn't natural, or at least not normal. I had to manually stop the rejection before your organs failed." His words carried weight, and I felt the truth of them in my bones. I had come so close to something irreversible. If I had waited longer, if I hadn't stumbled into this human medical facility, I clenched my fingers against the thin fabric of the bed. I had always believed my species was resilient, superior, in our ability to control our own bodies, our own destinies. And yet here I was, alive only because a human had refused to let me die. Ren shifted, leaning forward slightly, his gaze still fixed on me. "What happened?" he asked. "What caused this?" I hesitated. The question wasn't unexpected, but I wasn't sure I had an answer. My people's reproductive cycle was deeply ingrained in our biology, an instinct as natural as breathing. It wasn't supposed to fail. It was the bonding, I admitted finally. My voice felt strange, foreign to my own ears. My body was completing the process when something went wrong. My organ began to collapse instead of adapting. Ren frowned. "That's not normal?" "No." I forced myself to take a slow breath. "It has never happened before, not to my kind." His expression remained thoughtful, his fingers drumming lightly against the edge of the medical tray beside him. "Then there must have been an external factor," he said, "something that interfered with the process." I closed my eyes for a brief moment, trying to recall everything that had led to this. There had been no warning signs, no indication that my body would reject the bond. My species didn't even allow breeding without absolute compatibility. It was a biological certainty, a predetermined match. So why had my body reacted this way? I opened my eyes again to find Ren still watching me, his gaze sharp. There was no judgment there, no disgust, only a genuine desire to understand. "I need time," I admitted, "to think, to understand." Ren gave a small nod. "Then rest," he said. "You're safe here." Safe. The word echoed strangely in my mind. I had spent my entire life believing safety was something that came from control, from knowing every outcome before it happened. But now, in this sterile human medical facility, under the watchful care of a man I barely knew, I felt something unfamiliar. I wasn't in control, and yet I wasn't afraid. My body betrayed me quickly, dragging me into unconsciousness despite my resistance. The last thing I saw was Ren still sitting beside me, his presence steady, unmoving. When I woke, the lights in the medical room had dimmed, casting soft shadows across the walls. The pain had faded into a dull ache, lingering but no longer. Unbearable. My limbs felt less like dead weight, and when I flexed my fingers, they obeyed without hesitation. A quiet sound drew my attention. I turned my head slightly and found Ren still there, sitting near the edge of the room. He was leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees, exhaustion evident in the way his shoulders slumped. I had seen humans grow tired before, but never like this. He wasn't just physically worn. There was something else, something deeper in the way his expression remained distant, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. "You stayed," I said, my voice softer than I intended. Ren glanced up, startled for only a brief moment before his usual composure returned. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Didn't want to leave you alone in case something went wrong?" His words shouldn't have meant anything. He was a medic. It was his duty to care for the injured. And yet, something about the way he said it, the way he looked at me, made my chest tighten. I shifted slightly, testing the strength of my body. "I feel better." "You should. Your body is stabilizing." He studied me for a moment before adding, "Your system was in complete shutdown mode when you got here." I didn't know if I could reverse it. I took in a slow breath. "You did," Ren exhaled, a hint of relief passing over his face before he masked it again. "Good." He leaned back in his chair. "Still, I don't know enough about your species to be sure this won't happen again. We need to figure out what caused it." I knew he was right, but I wasn't ready to answer yet. My body had betrayed me, and I needed to understand why before I could let myself think about the future. There was a long silence between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Finally I spoke. "You saved me." Ren glanced at me again, his lips pressing together. "Yeah," I hesitated. "Why?" He frowned slightly, as if the question was strange to him. "Because you were dying." "That is not what I meant." His gaze lingered on me for a moment before he sighed. He looked away, rubbing his hands together absently. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just couldn't let it happen." His answer surprised me. There was no grand reasoning, no obligation or duty behind his actions. He had simply chosen to help. I had spent my life among my own kind, where everything was carefully measured, planned, and controlled. Emotions were secondary to logic. But Ren had acted on instinct, on something unexplainable, and he hadn't hesitated. "Humans are strange," I murmured. Ren let out a short breath that almost resembled a laugh. "Yeah," he agreed. "We are." Another pause, and then he added, "You should sleep more. You need to recover." I didn't argue. My body still felt weak, and as much as I hated it, I knew I needed rest. I let my eyes drift shut again, listening to the quiet hum of the medical equipment, the faint sound of Ren's breathing. For the first time since arriving on this planet, I let myself stop thinking, and I slept. The next time I woke, I felt different, stronger. My limbs no longer ached as I shifted, and when I sat up, the dizziness that had plagued me before was gone. Ren noticed immediately. He moved closer, scanning me with his medical device, his expression focused. "You're stabilizing faster than I expected," he muttered. "Your body is adapting." I flexed my fingers, testing the strength in them. "I heal quickly." Clearly. He set the device aside. "But you're not out of danger yet. If this happens again, it won't." I met his gaze. I will make sure of it. He studied me for a long moment before exhaling. You're stubborn. I am Arvan. Ren shook his head, but there was something almost amused in his expression. Yeah, well, that doesn't mean you have to go through this alone. The words struck something deep inside me, something unfamiliar yet undeniably real. I had always believed that strength came from solitude, from proving oneself capable of surviving alone. But now as I looked at Ren, this human who had saved me without hesitation, who had sat by my side through the worst of my pain, I wondered if I had been wrong. Perhaps strength was not about facing things alone. Perhaps it was about knowing when to let someone in. I swung my legs over the side of the medical bed, testing the strength in them. They held firm beneath me, though a lingering weakness remained, a reminder of how close I had come to losing myself. I exhaled slowly and stood. Ren was beside me in an instant, his hands hovering near my arms, ready to catch me if I fell. But I didn't. You shouldn't push yourself too fast, he said. Your body is still recovering. I cannot stay in this bed forever, I replied, meeting his gaze. I need to move, to understand what happened. His brow furrowed, and for a moment I thought he would argue, but he simply sighed and took a step back. All right, he said, but take it slow. I took a cautious step forward, then another. My muscles protested, but the pain was manageable. I focused on the rhythm of my breathing, grounding myself in the present. Ren walked beside me, watching carefully. You're healing faster than any human would. My species was designed to endure, I said, but something went wrong. My body failed when it was not supposed to. He nodded. That's what we need to figure out, I turned to him. You know human medicine, but you do not know my biology. How will you find the answer? His lips pressed together in thought. You're right. I don't have the knowledge to diagnose this on my own. He hesitated, then said, but there's someone who might. I narrowed my eyes. Who? Ren shifted his weight. Dr. Anaya Voss. She's one of the leading xenobiologists on this planet. If anyone can help us understand what happened to you, it's her. A human scientist. The thought made me uneasy. My people did not trust outsiders with our biology. It was a deeply ingrained instinct, an understanding that to reveal too much was to make ourselves vulnerable. But I had already been vulnerable. I had nearly died, and I still did not know why. I nodded slowly. Then, take me to her. Ren studied me as if searching for hesitation. Finding none, he exhaled. All right. But first, you need food and water. Your body lost a lot of energy. I had not even noticed the hunger gnawing at my insides until he mentioned it. My species did not require sustenance as frequently as humans, but after the ordeal I had endured, I needed to replenish my strength. Ren led me out of the medical bay and into a small, dimly lit room. The air was heavy with the scent of unfamiliar spices, and a table sat in the center, lined with various plates of food. I hesitated. Human food may not be compatible with my system. Ren picked up a small device and scanned a few of the items. Some of this should be safe. Proteins, simple carbohydrates. Try this. He handed me a small piece of food. I studied it, then took a cautious bite. The texture was strange, the taste unfamiliar, but it did not cause an immediate rejection. I swallowed. Ren smirked. See? Not so bad. I said nothing, focusing on the act of eating. The food settled in my stomach, and I felt a slow return of strength. Ren sat across from me, watching me with a quiet intensity. You never told me why you were alone when you collapsed? I stiffened. The question was not unexpected, but it was not one I was ready to answer. He waited, patient but unrelenting. Finally, I set my food down. Because I was abandoned, his expression darkened. By who? My mate. The words felt bitter, on my tongue. The one who was supposed to complete the bond with me. Ren straightened slightly. He left you? I exhaled slowly. He ran. A long silence stretched between us. Finally, Ren spoke. I'm sorry. I looked at him, surprised. Why? He shrugged. Because no one deserves to be abandoned. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. Humans had such strange ways of expressing emotion. In my culture, such things were rarely spoken aloud. But here, in this quiet space, Ren had given me something I had not expected: understanding. I looked down at my hands. My species bonds for life. There is no breaking of the connection once it is made. My fingers curled slightly. Except something went wrong. He must have sensed it, and instead of helping me, he left. Ren's jaw tightened. Coward. I let out a short breath that might have been a bitter laugh. Perhaps. He leaned forward slightly. What happens now, without the bond? I hesitated. I do not know. It was the truth. My people did not prepare for this kind of failure. The bond was supposed to be absolute. Ren studied me for a long moment. Then he stood. Come on. We should go before it gets too late. I rose as well, feeling steadier than before. To the scientist? He nodded. She'll have questions. A lot of them. I will answer what I can, I said, but I will not tell her everything. That's fair. He led me outside, where the night air was cool against my skin. The city stretched before us, filled with unfamiliar lights and sounds. Humans moved in groups, talking and laughing, oblivious to the turmoil inside me. Ren motioned toward a vehicle. Come on. I hesitated for only a moment before following him inside. The doors closed with a quiet hiss, and the vehicle moved forward, carrying us toward whatever answers lay ahead. For the first time in my life, I was walking a path with no certainty, and yet for the first time, I was not walking it alone. The quiet hum of the vehicle filled the space between us as we traveled through the city. I sat still, watching the world blur past the window, taking in the strange, pulsing lights, the unfamiliar structures. Everything about this place was foreign, and yet, for the first time since arriving here, I did not feel entirely alone. Ren sat beside me, focused on the road, his fingers occasionally tightening on the steering wheel, as if lost in thought. He had not asked any more questions, but I could feel them lingering in the air between us. Finally, I broke the silence. This Dr. Voss, she will not treat me like an experiment, will she? Ren glanced at me. No, she's not like that. She studies xenobiology because she wants to understand, not because she wants to exploit. I nodded, though the unease remained. My species had always been cautious about revealing too much to outsiders, but I had little choice now. I needed answers. The vehicle slowed as we approached a towering building, sleek and cold against the night sky. Ren guided me inside, his presence steady beside me as we moved through brightly lit halls. Finally, we reached a door. Ren knocked once, and moments later, it slid open with a soft hiss. A woman stood before us, tall with dark hair pulled back, sharp eyes that immediately locked onto me. She took in my appearance with a calculating gaze before stepping aside. Come in, she said. I hesitated only briefly before following Ren inside. Dr. Voss wasted no time. She motioned for me to sit while she pulled up a holographic screen, filled with data and charts. Ren filled me in on the basics, she said, but I need details. Tell me exactly what happened. I exhaled slowly. My species bonds for life. It is a biological certainty. But during the process, something went wrong. Dr. Voss nodded. Your body rejected the bond? Yes. And my mate, he left. She frowned, tapping on the screen. That shouldn't be possible if your species is as genetically compatible as you say. Something interfered with the process. Ren leaned forward. That's what we were thinking. Could there have been an external factor? Dr. Voss studied me for a long moment. Before the bonding began, did you consume anything unusual? Were you exposed to anything different? I thought back. There had been nothing out of the ordinary until I arrived on this planet. My body was adjusting to Earth's atmosphere, I said. Perhaps something in the air, the environment. Dr. Voss nodded. That's possible. But I'll need to run some tests. She turned to Ren. Help me set up the scanner." Wren moved quickly, assisting her as she activated a large diagnostic machine. I watched as it whirred to life, casting a soft blue glow across the room. Dr. Voss gestured for me to step forward. "This will analyze your cellular structure, compare it to known elements in Earth's environment. If something interfered with your biology, we'll find it." I hesitated for only a moment before stepping into the machine. The light pulsed around me, scanning, searching. I closed my eyes, willing the answers to come. A few moments later, the machine beeped, and Dr. Voss's expression shifted as she examined the results. "There," she said, pointing to the screen. "That's it." Wren and I moved closer. "What is it?" I asked. Dr. Voss turned to me, her expression serious. "Your body was exposed to a foreign protein, something Earth-based but unknown to your biology. It disrupted your system, caused the bond rejection. That's why your body went into crisis." I frowned. Where would I have encountered this? Dr. Voss tapped a few buttons, cross-referencing the data. Then her eyes widened slightly. "It's synthetic," she murmured. "Lab-made." Wren's expression darkened. "You mean someone did this on purpose?" Dr. Voss nodded. "It looks that way." A cold weight settled in my chest. Someone had sabotaged my bonding process. Someone had ensured that my body would fail. Wren clenched his fists. "Who the hell would do that?" Dr. Voss turned to me. "Do you have any enemies? Anyone who would want to interfere with your bond?" I exhaled slowly, considering. "Not personally, but there are those among my people who see bonds with outsiders as dangerous." Wren's jaw tightened. "So someone from your own kind did this?" I shook my head. "I do not know, but if this was deliberate, then it means someone wanted me to suffer, to be rejected." A long silence stretched between us. Then Wren spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "Then we find out who," Dr. Voss nodded. "I can trace the synthetic compound, see if there's a source, but it will take time." I met her gaze. "Do it." She turned back to her screens, already pulling up more data. Wren placed a hand on my shoulder, his touch grounding. "You're not alone in this," he said. "We'll figure it out." I looked at him, feeling something shift inside me, a bond that was not biological, not forced by nature, but something chosen, something real. For the first time since my collapse, I felt steady, stronger, and I knew, no matter what came next, I would not face it alone.